Hello beautiful people, welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a couple weeks since you last saw me, but your girl is back. And in this video I wanted to share some things that I have been eating honestly over the past week and a half. So this video is going to be a mix of ingredient prep, how I use the ingredient prep, and other things that I've been eating as well. Starting off with a homemade chimichurri sauce. So my husband and I have been doing this thing where we try to recreate a bowl that we've had at a restaurant, and this week we wanted to recreate the sweet green steak chimichurri steak bowl, and that meant I had to make my own chimichurri sauce, which is honestly very easy. All you need is fresh parsley, fresh cilantro, dried oregano, garlic, salt, black pepper, red pepper flakes, some oil. I ended up using avocado oil, as well as red wine vinegar. This was our second week having the same bowl, so I've made chimichurri sauce at least 3 times already, and I want to say it keeps well in the fridge for about 3 to 4 days. It also just depends on how fresh your fresh herbs are as well. I have also been on a homemade hash brown kick lately. The last time I made homemade hash browns, I just used regular russet potatoes. This week I had some sweet potatoes, purple and orange. So I wanted to see if I could use those for hash browns. And these are really easy to make. I'm honestly surprised at the fact that I have not tried these before, because all you have to do is shred the potatoes, give them a really good wash, squeeze as much water out as you possibly can, and then you just season it up with seasonings of your choice. I tend to keep it simple, so I just use salt, black pepper, some garlic powder, and then I added some cornstarch to act as a binder, as well as some olive oil. Transparently, I could have squeezed even more water out of these, which you'll see the results later in the video, but honestly, when I go back to make more homemade hash browns, I'm probably just gonna stick to russet potatoes. I don't know if sweet potatoes have more water content than russet potatoes, or it could have just been the fact that I didn't squeeze as much water out as I should have. And after I shape the hash browns, I just freeze them on this baking tray, and then once they're completely frozen, I just transfer them to a bag so that I can grab 1 or 2 whenever I want to use them. And after making those 2 things, I decided to take a break, but then I came back because I was like, I need to make another sauce for the week for my salads. And I ended up deciding to make a spicy Caesar salad dressing, and I used some hummus as the base. Normally for my Caesar salad dressing, I would use plant-based mayo or vegan mayo, but I ran all out of mayo, so decided to use the hummus up. And I've done this before and it works really well. So for the salad dressing, I went in with hummus as I mentioned. I also added in a bit of Dijon mustard, some salt, black pepper, nutritional yeast, vegan W sauce, you know what I'm trying to say. I also added in some minced garlic and capers, as well as warm water. And then for the spicy component of the dressing, I added in chili crunch. Normally I would use Calabrian chili paste, but I didn't have any. I couldn't find any, surprisingly, so I just used what I had at home already. Now, if you've seen my other videos, you know that this is a tofu stand account, channel, whatever you want to call it. I had some tofu that I had frozen and then thawed out, because if you didn't know, that changes the texture of tofu. It helps the tofu absorb more of the flavor. It makes it less chewy and gives it more of a bite. And I wanted to prep a batch of that for the week. I planned on having it later this day, so earlier in the day I just went ahead and knocked it out so I didn't have to worry about it when it came time to make my dinner. So I quickly marinated it in some coconut aminos, and then for the coating that I used nutritional yeast and cornstarch, and then just a variety of seasonings. You can honestly get very creative when it comes to the seasonings. It takes well to just about any flavor. I mean, I don't imagine that like cinnamon or anything would be good, but you know, something that you would use for a savory meat substitute will work. And I ended up using this over about 3 to 4 different servings, including my dinner, as I mentioned previously. Now for dinner this day, I decided I wanted to have a lettuce wrap. I have been a huge fan of lettuce wraps lately. I don't know why, maybe because they're just so refreshing, and as someone who loves salads, I enjoy eating everything in one bite on the fork, you know what I mean? So these lettuce wraps are essentially just the salad rolled up, and when I take a bite into it, I can taste everything. So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. But this lettuce wrap that I'm having for dinner is a Thai inspired lettuce wrap. So it's almost everything that I use in my Thai chopped salad, which if you haven't seen that video, I'll have it linked in the description box. It's essentially almost everything that I use in there. So I have my lettuce, I have red bell peppers, some red onions, purple cabbage, cilantro, cucumber, crispy tofu, some broccoli sprouts. I also threw in some crispy wontons. That is something different that I don't include on the salad, but going forward I might have to. And then I drizzled it with my spicy peanut dressing. This was out of this world. And as I told you, my husband and I have been enjoying making kind of like copycat bowls. So for lunch this day, I decided that I wanted to make a tofu or chimichurri tofu veggie bowl. Essentially, I just cut up some cherry tomatoes. I had some sweet potatoes as well as broccoli that I had prepped. And then I just put that over a bed of rice and I topped it with that chimichurri sauce. And he just has his with his own source of protein, and I enjoyed mine with tofu, as you see here. Lately, life has been all about prepping things ahead. How can I prep some meals, ingredients to kind of make life a little bit easier? And later that night, I decided that I wanted to prep some tempeh bacon. And this is pretty much my tofu bacon recipe, but I'm using tempeh instead. So I go in with ingredients like coconut aminos, some vegan W sauce, a little bit of maple syrup, liquid smoke, tomato paste, nutritional yeast, smoked paprika, garlic powder, black pepper, and warm water. I may be missing a few, but I'll have the tofu bacon recipe linked in the description so you can actually see the full list of ingredients there. So the only thing I did different is instead of tofu, I used tempeh. I just used regular tempeh that I just cut into squares, and then I allowed this to marinate in the refrigerator overnight because the next day I wanted to use this on a breakfast biscuit sandwich, on a biscuit breakfast sandwich. You get what I'm trying to say. And also on the sandwich, I wanted to include a tofu egg patty. So I just added some of my tofu egg seasoning blend to some dairy-free milk, and then I submerged some tofu slices into this marinade. And I let that marinate for about 30 minutes or so. While that was marinating, I went ahead and cooked up my tempeh bacon, which, as you're aware, was marinating overnight. So I just took a couple of the tempeh slices, added them to a skillet along with some of the marinade and the water. And I like to let this simmer so that it begins to soften. If you haven't had tempeh before, it is and can be very firm. So I found that by letting it simmer covered, it tends to help soften the tempeh up. And while the tempeh was doing its thing, it was time for the tofu egg patty to do its thing. So I just added those tofu slices to a separate skillet, and then I added some of the marinade and water as well because it helps the tofu absorb more of the flavors from the marinade. Something else I've been doing is trying to build up my confidence in baking. I'm not a huge baker, but I have been actively just trying little things here and there, and I'm really glad that I did because I've been working on this sweet potato biscuit recipe for a while now, which I do plan to share over on my Instagram account, so be sure to follow me over there if you have not already. So I just added down a layer of jam followed by the tempeh bacon and the tofu egg patty. I am very much a sweet and savory breakfast sandwich kind of girl, and this biscuit sandwich, oh my gosh, it was 10 out of 10. And if you've been following me over on Instagram, you already know that the yellow kiwis are going to make an appearance, right? Like, you know that I am obsessed with these. They are so good, much more better than green kiwis, but I'm honestly so sad because the season is coming to an end and the section at the grocery store for the yellow kiwis is getting smaller and smaller by the weeks. But anyway, let's move on to this next meal. So for dinner this day, I went ahead and cut up some yellow potatoes that I just drizzled with some olive oil and I seasoned with black pepper and salt. I just tossed those and put them in the oven, and while those were baking, I worked on some oyster mushrooms that I wanted to press. For the mushrooms, I just seasoned those up with some salt, black pepper. I threw in this Caribbean seasoning blend that I just found in my spice drawer. Also added in some garlic and onion powder and smoked paprika, and I just gave that a good mix until everything was coated. And we're making pressed oyster mushrooms, as I mentioned, so I just added some of the mushrooms to a dry skillet over medium heat, and then I pressed them down using a smaller lid. The goal here is to extract the majority of the moisture that comes in mushrooms. If you didn't know, they have a lot of water in them, and so we want to press them to remove that. And then you flip it over and you do the exact same thing to the other side. And you'll know they're ready when they have a nice char to them, they're flatter and a bit more stiff. And I just ended up having the mushrooms with some green beans, those roasted potatoes that we made, and then I topped the mushrooms with that chimichurri sauce that I showed you how to make earlier in the video. I ended up having this exact same meal a second time, but instead of using mushrooms, I just used more tofu. Go figure. I'm using a lot of tofu in this video. I had stocked up for the week. The tofu that I typically buy was on sale, and there we go. And it was finally time to cook up some of the sweet potato hash browns that we had ingredient prepped. So I just added those to my air fryer. I sprayed them with a little bit of olive oil, and I typically would air fry my homemade hash browns on about 400 degrees for anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, just so that they get crispy. And while I was editing this video, as I mentioned, I realized I used a lot of tofu in this video, but in my defense, I am using a variety of tofu. I'm using some soy-based tofu as well as soy-free tofu. This day, I just took that tofu egg marinade from the patty and I added it to some crumbled fava bean tofu. And then I also wanted to enjoy this with some sauerkraut, which is good for your digestive system, has really good probiotics, all the things. And of course, the yellow kiwis are gonna make an appearance. I'm telling y'all, I eat 1 to 2 of these every day without fail, unless I'm all out or I'm on vacation. Now, I'll be honest, this was not the most appealing dish, but everything tastes really well, so I'm not mad at it. Another thing I've been keeping up with are my matchas. I did have a moment where I was consuming more coffee than matcha, and I was so confused. I had to snap out of it. So we're about to make a matcha and moringa tea. And I don't always add moringa powder to my matcha, but I did this day because I was running low on my actual matcha powder. But I mean, moringa powder is really good for you. It helps with like your skin, your hair, digestion, has antioxidants, helps with your blood pressure, and a host of other benefits. So I'm not mad at the addition, but I do need to go ahead and stock back up on my matcha powder because I miss making matcha, and it's been like 4 days since I've had this one. Grandma not mad, grandma just hurting. I'm hurting. I hope y'all know where that sound is from. If you're on TikTok, you probably know. Also this week, I made some roasted red pepper hummus for a campaign that I'm working on with a brand. I didn't include it in this video, but I did want to show you the finished products because one, the plate looked amazing and the hummus was delicious. This is going to be over on my Instagram and my TikTok account, so if you're not following me over there, be sure to do so. And I realized I haven't shown you how I've been using up the spicy Caesar dressing. I actually used some of it in a spicy Caesar pasta salad. So I just washed and chopped some romaine lettuce as well as dino kale. I cooked up some protein pasta, added some sourdough croutons that I found at the grocery store along with some of that tofu that we had prepped earlier in the week, and then I tossed it all together with that spicy Caesar salad dressing. And I just know this would be a really good meal prep. It was so light and refreshing, and I ended up topping it with some shredded vegan Parmesan cheese. Y'all, this one was too good, okay? And then for the last meal in this video, we had some more oyster mushrooms in the refrigerator, and my husband was like, ooh, we should make some fried oyster mushrooms. And listen, I'm not gonna argue with you about fried oyster mushrooms because one thing they are good. And we don't eat fried foods too often, so this was a nice little treat, if you want to call it that. I do have my fried oyster mushroom recipe in my digital cookbook, which I'll have linked in the description box if you want to try it out. I know with the holidays coming up, that cookbook is filled with recipes that would be great for the holidays. So my vegan mac and cheese, some collard greens, these fried oyster mushrooms, my sweet potato pie, the list goes on. I'll have a link in the description, but back to these mushrooms. So I just took the oyster mushrooms, I seasoned them up, and then I dipped them in a wet mix and then a dry mix. And I do that 2 times so they can get extra crispy. Now, when I made these this night, I did fry them on the stove in some avocado oil, but you have the option to either fry them on the stove, you can air fry them, or bake them. I've tried them all 3 ways, and each one works well. I will say that frying them on the stove gets them the crispiest, but they also get crispy in the air fryer or the oven, just not as crispy on the stove. They're still good though, don't get me wrong. And I ended up combining some maple syrup with some buffalo sauce for like a sweet and spicy type of sauce to drizzle on top of these. Listen, this is one of my go-to sauce combinations, but on top of these mushrooms, they were 10 out of 10. So crunchy, so crispy, just overall amazing. We really enjoyed these, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you here next week.